On Pentecost Sunday, God's kingdom went global. As the nations gathered in Jerusalem, the Holy Spirit came, and Jesus' followers told of God's mighty acts in languages from across the world. But what nations were present? What languages did they speak? And why was Pentecost so important? After Jesus ascended into heaven, his followers were together in a house when suddenly there came a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit. As tongues of fire rested on them, they each began to declare God's mighty works in a different language. Now, this happened during the Feast of Weeks, when Jews from all over the world were visiting Jerusalem on pilgrimage. At the sound of the rushing wind, they gathered together, and when each suddenly heard their native language being spoken, they were amazed and astonished. These Jews had come from more than a dozen regions throughout the two great empires of the first century, Rome and Parthia. Now, each empire had a common language. In the Roman Empire, Greek, and in the Parthian Empire, Aramaic. Yet each region also had its own dialect, so that most people were bilingual, speaking both the local and common language. In other words, the Jews at Pentecost weren't just hearing Greek and Aramaic, but the native tongues of their distant homelands, and all spoken by a group of Jews from Galilee. And when they heard of what God had done through Jesus by raising him from the dead, many believed, were baptized, and returned to their own country, sharing the good news. Therefore, many of the regions represented at Pentecost became early centers of the church and played important roles in the book of Acts and the New Testament letters. In other words, Pentecost acted as both a catalyst and a foreshadowing of God's kingdom spreading quickly to a multitude of nations. From the Parthian Empire, there were Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, all of whom spoke Aramaic. The region of Parthia was the historic home of the Parthian Empire. Located in modern-day Turkmenistan and northeast Iran, its inhabitants spoke Parthian. Media was located in the Iranian plateau. More than 7 centuries before, when Assyria conquered Israel, they had deported the Israelites to live among the Medes, whose language was Median. Elam straddled mountains and lowlands, and its capital, Susa, was the home of Esther, Mordecai, and Nehemiah. Its inhabitants spoke Elamite. Mesopotamia was the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and the cradle of ancient civilizations like Assyria and Babylon. Its residents spoke Aramaic. Indeed, Mesopotamia was central to the Pentecost story for 2 reasons. First, thousands of years before, it had been home to the Tower of Babel. When humans used the shared language to build their own kingdom rather than God's, God confused their speech and scattered them across the earth. Second, Mesopotamia was the original home of Abraham. When God called Abraham to another land, he promised him that one day through his offspring, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Now at Pentecost, these stories were being fulfilled as God reversed Babel and made good on his promise to Abraham by gathering the nations back together and blessing them through Abraham's descendants. Among these nations were not only those of the Parthian, but also the Roman Empire, Judea and Syria, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, the parts of Libya near Cyrene, Rome, Crete, and Arabia. Although most spoke Greek, each had its own language or dialect as well. Judea, the Jewish heartland, contained Jerusalem and the Temple, and Syria, its northern neighbor, was home to Damascus and Antioch, 2 important cities of the early church. The inhabitants of these lands spoke Aramaic and Hebrew. The next 5 regions spread across modern-day Turkey and Greece. Cappadocia was a rugged inland landscape and a vital connector between East and West. Its people spoke Cappadocian. Pontus stretched along the southern coast of the Black Sea and was the home of Paul's co-worker Aquila. Its people spoke various Anatolian dialects. The Roman province of Asia was wealthy and Hellenistic, and its cities were important centers of the early church: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. While Asia was dominated by Greek, local dialects like Lydian and Carian were still active. Phrygia, an ancient inland kingdom, was a regular destination for Paul during his missionary journeys, and its inhabitants spoke Phrygian. Pamphylia bridged the Hellenized coast with the more traditional inland, and was the gateway into Asia Minor for Paul and Barnabas on their first missionary journey. Its people spoke Pamphylian. Across the Mediterranean from Pamphylia was Egypt, the breadbasket of the Roman Empire, and one of the most important lands in the Bible. Egypt had been the Jews' home long ago before the Exodus, and in the first century, it still contained a huge Jewish diaspora, including the largest Jewish city on earth, Alexandria. The language spoken here was Demotic Egyptian. West of Egypt was Libya and Cyrene. The province of Libya stretched across the north coast of Africa, and the Greek city of Cyrene was an early center of Christianity. In fact, a man from Cyrene named Simon had been visiting Jerusalem for Passover when he was compelled to carry Jesus' cross to Golgotha. The people here spoke Libyan and Berber languages. Next was Rome, the capital of the empire, the center of imperial power, and by far the largest city on earth with 1 million residents. The presence of Romans among those at Pentecost foreshadowed the spread of the good news to the very heart of the ancient world by the end of the book of Acts. Romans spoke Latin. Returning east from Rome was Crete, a large Greek island home to the ancient Minoan civilization. Its churches were later overseen by Paul's companion Titus, and its people spoke Cretan Greek. The final nation at Pentecost was Arabia. In the first century, Arabia referred to the lands immediately south and east of Judea, especially the mountain kingdom of Nabatea, centered on Petra. Arabians spoke Old Arabic and Nabatean Aramaic. The day of Pentecost was not just a miracle of languages, but the dawning of God's new world. On the cross, death was defeated and sin was broken. And when the risen Jesus poured out the promised Spirit on all flesh in Jerusalem, that liberating power was made available to all. At the Tower of Babel, humans used a common message to build their own kingdom, and they were scattered across the earth. On the day of Pentecost, God gathered the nations back and entrusted them with a common message and a global kingdom. Yet this kingdom and this message were not found in human pride like Babel, but in the mighty works of God. And when God then scattered them across the earth, he did so not to judge, but to save, so that all might hear the good news of his love, that every nation, tribe, people, and language might one day stand before the throne and before the Lamb.